Welcome to Mob Talk Sit-Down. I'm Dave Schratwieser.
And I'm George Anastasia.
George, the Gambino Crime Family out of New York, under attack in multiple jurisdictions: Philadelphia, New York, Sicily, and now Orange County, New York.
Right, looks like somebody might know where the bodies are buried, and that's what's all about.
All right, George, lots of action involving the Gambino Crime Family out of New York. Incredible current events going on, including this week. Walk us through this.
Yeah, I mean, the latest development is they're digging up 2 horse farms in New York State. And the allegation is, or the supposition is, they're looking for some bodies. And when they're doing that kind of stuff, you can be sure they've got cooperators, they got people feeding them information. This, I think, was a long time coming. And then it overlaps into New Jersey, connects to that part funding situation down here in Philadelphia. And there's connections, although I'm waiting to see the dots to connect to Sicily. There was a roundup in Sicily as well.
Yeah.
The Gambinos have always had a Sicilian connection, if you will, and this might be part of that.
All right. These farms are 65 miles outside of New York City.
Right.
Long been in the hands of one gentleman in particular. I've been told that was kind of like a lodge, a hangout for the Gambinos to go up into upstate New York and relax, cigar smoking, drinking, shooting, hunting, that kind of stuff. Other activity I'm also hearing about. And it's long been known that they like to go there by law enforcement. But something kicked this off, and you have to have probable cause to get a search warrant to start digging.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why that bears watching is what are they looking for, and when is there going to be more documentation. But in terms of, I mean, you think about art imitating life. Horse farms, Morris Levy, that connected with the Genovese crime family, had a horse farm where they always would retire to. And then the Sopranos picked that same thing up and made it part of the HBO series in terms of Hesh and his horse farm. So that's not new. And I think law enforcement's always been aware of these kind of connections. And as you said earlier, somebody had to say there's something up there. You don't just go up there and start digging up the ground.
Yeah, I'm hearing about a particular Gambino soldier from Sicily who fled Italy and moved here years ago, who was living on the property. In fact, one of the neighbors said, there's a guy here, and he blurted out the guy's name. He likes to shoot up on the property. He got lots of guns up there. But, you know, it's upstate New York, 65 miles away from the city. People go up there to hunt.
Absolutely. I mean, and partly that may be it. It just was a getaway, a vacation spot. But in addition, the search warrants have to indicate we have a reason to go here. Here's what we're looking for.
And I bet they're sealed.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
All right, so walk us back. Last week, 10 members of the Gambino crime family here in New York get indicted, and then 6 more are getting picked up in Italy. Right. And it's about one of our favorite topics, the carting business and the demolition business.
And carting. I mean, this is, again, not new. And this is an investigation, I think, that goes back at least 6 or 7 years. And what they're talking about is racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, witness retaliation, and the other, I mean, there's a lot of staples of organized crime.
Yeah.
No-show jobs. You collect a paycheck and you get the health benefits. Yeah. Intimidation. These guys apparently were a little bit around the bend in terms of the violence. I mean, we had seen a diminution of violence. Yeah. Guys are getting smart enough. You don't want to do that, you attract attention. These guys, they're going into a restaurant, hit a guy at a table with a bottle. They get kicked out of a bar in Tom's River. They come back and threaten the owner. They beat the owner's wife. A lot of crazy, crazy stuff. They set us steps on fire, potential arson. I think these guys were, either they got too full of themselves or too confident, and they're overly aggressive. And all of this has come home to roost now.
All right, you're talking about Joe Lanny, the capo at the top of that indictment.
Right, denied bail in this
Joe
case.
Brooklyn, I think they call him. He's the one involved in this Tom's River thing that we'd already talked about a little bit. That he's in a restaurant, he's there for a long period of time. There's some allegations he was intoxicated. They had some prior history. Supposedly he started getting agitated with the owner. Allegedly waits outside for the owner.
Yeah, he was asked to leave apparently, and then
that's an embarrassing thing for a capo in a Gambino crime family to be doing that.
Well, I mean, I think these guys were beyond that. I think these guys, again, we're only reading the indictment and what's been written. It looks like these guys, some of these guys got too full of themselves, and they lost sight of what it's all about. And you know, ironically, Dave, I mean, we mentioned on the periphery of this, that par funding case in Philadelphia. Same kind of thing. It's overly aggressive violence out in public.
We thought that was over.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Because of video and audio and all kinds of technology, tracking your phones to where you were at. I mean, we thought that was over. It's not.
Well, I mean, that kind of stuff is happening, and there's also some stupidity. Apparently, in that Tom's River
a lot
case,
of that.
they were calling up on the phone threatening the guy. The wife had called the cops arrive, and the cop walks in and he listens to the phone call. It wasn't even a phone tap. And he said, "You better beg for my forgiveness." But, I mean,
and Liney gets hooked up right there.
Yeah.
I mean, they get him right away.
Yeah, and I think there are tapes in this case. There always are tapes. And no doubt there are cooperators. So this is a case that really bears watching, because I think it's all, in a way, old school. This is the way the mob used to be. And these guys, with their Sicilian connections in Sicily, it still is old school, and that's what's happened here.
Back to the farm for a minute there. I mean, when they go digging for bodies, we could be talking about bodies from years ago. Cases that some big name guys might have been involved in back in the day, who are on the street now. Some of them have passed away. The possibilities are enormous.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's all speculation, but you know, you say, take the guy to the farm. What does that mean? I mean, you know, that's the way some of these guys operated back then, and who knows? I mean, I think there's a lot more that's going to come out in this case, and it certainly bears watching.
Folks were saying the mob was dead. They're not into the things they used to be into. The FBI doesn't want to investigate them. They want to spend the time on them. They clearly are spending time on this.
Well, I mean, this is a lot
with
of
the
ways,
NYPD.
Right. This is a throwback, and I think, and again, it comes back to what we said earlier. You commit blatant acts of violence, the FBI can't ignore you, even if they got us. The squad has been diminished and they're looking at other things. You got guys acting like this, acting out in public. They got to react, and that's what's happened.
All right, one of the guys in that indictment last week is James LaForte. We're going to talk about him in a minute in the par funding case. And folks, wait till you hear what's inside the pretrial detention motion for he and his brother. Incredible stuff, 25 pages long.
Overly aggressive use of violence, really no need for any of that, and that's the way these guys apparently operated.
All right, George, the par funding case in Philadelphia, $500 million alleged fraud, white-collar case involving Joseph LaForte, James LaForte, and a bunch of other people. This thing is huge. Was indicted back in May. We've talked about it before. We've talked about them before. But when you read some of the documents, including this 25-page pretrial motion to detain them without bail, they are being held without bail. This stuff's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and you think James LaForte is identified in that indictment in New York as a soldier in the Gambino family. And if you look at par funding in the context of what just happened up there, the same tactics were being used in this multi-million-dollar fraud case. You know, you're not paying, we're coming at you. And there was acts of violence that, again, when we first reported on it, I said, this is ridiculous, this kind of violence in this setting. But if the setting is actually organized crime, it fits the pattern. This is, I think, a rogue wing of the Gambino crime family that's just gotten totally out of control. And I think we may see more connections between that up there in New York and this par funding as it plays out.
Well, let's be clear, though, in this current indictment, there are no allegations about organized crime, other than the fact that James LaForte, his brother Joseph, there are some rumors around about his involvement. He makes some statements in here that are reminiscent of things that those kind of folks that enforcers would say, and we'll get to that in a minute. And apparently some family members back in the day were involved with the Gambino Crime
I mean that's it's all on the periphery of all of this, but the tactics and approach in this case, in terms of the threats and the violence, are very similar to what we've seeing in New York. It's, here's who we are, you better pay us or else. That's what's happened.
The U.S. Attorney calls it a campaign of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and retaliation. Let's get into a couple of specifics. There are at least 5 alleged incidents mentioned in here involving either violence or threats of violence. Break a couple of them down for us.
Well, I mean, there was one. It was the attorney was attacked on the streets of Philadelphia. I think James LaForte is charged in that. Attacked him, hit him in the head with, was it a flashlight?
Yeah.
I mean, that was kind of a brutal attack.
Right after a hearing that the guy had just left involving this case with the SEC, and the guy went to the hospital with 7 staples in his head. This is a prominent attorney in Philadelphia that a lot of guys know. Yeah,
I mean, it comes back to what we're talking about, the audacity of all of this. Either they don't care or they're not afraid, or this is who we are, this is what we do. And I think they tried to bring those tactics, the underworld tactics, to a world, financial wheeling and dealing, where people are going to say, wait a minute, and they go to the police.
Yeah.
They're not as intimidated.
Yeah.
Some were, of course, but it's almost mind-boggling when you look at it. And as we said earlier, you thought this particular era of organized crime was done.
Yeah.
We're into a new age now. These guys, they're in what, their 30s, their 40s, maybe some of them are in their 50s. They're bringing back that old world kind of,
yeah.
We're who we are and we can do whatever we want, and if you don't like it, you're going to pay. There's consequences.
There's a contact with one guy where they allegedly say they're going to burn his house down. We know where your daughters live, and they read off the addresses to him. They make a phone call to one of the daughters making alleged threats.
Yeah.
But there's one in here talking about a very well-known property manager, real estate kind of guy in Philadelphia who gets a visit from Joe LaForte, in which he says allegedly says he's going to clip him and his wife, that's his words, and that he has 500 guys on the street behind me.
Yeah, see, I mean, all of that, when it originally broke, we said, was this guy puffing? What does this all mean?
Yeah.
But now when you see what's going up in New York and the connection, you say, well, you know, maybe this is part and parcel of the same kind of operation. All of these dots have yet to be connected, but what we're seeing in par funding is typical of a mob operation, even though there's no organized crime allegations in that particular case.
Yeah.
And then when you see what happened in New York this past week, you say, let's start connecting the dots. Are these the same players? We don't know. I mean, here's the thing, and you've said this before. If they're generating this kind of money, if they're ripping people off and extorting people, are they kicking up to anybody?
Where's it going
to go? I mean, that's the question. If this is organized crime connected, all of that money's not going in their pockets. Some of that money's got to go to the powers that be. And that's a question that kind of sits out there. We'll see where this goes.
Let me focus that question a little more. This place was headquartered on 3rd Street in Old City, Philadelphia. I jogged down that street. I used to see Joe LaForte hanging outside in a Bentley. And then I've seen other people hanging there, which would make you think there's something going on here. Do you think that Gambino connected people, whether there's organized crime in here or not, there's no disputing their background, they're convicted felons on top of it. Do you think that they could run a $500 million white-collar crime ripoff based in the heart of Philadelphia and not be kicking to somebody in Philadelphia?
I mean,
$500 million.
Yeah.
Do you think that it would be a problem to break off $100,000 a year for somebody?
Well, I mean,
I'm speculating.
Yeah, and the question sits there. And the question is, if they're operating in Philadelphia, do they feel a need to pay tribute to the Philadelphia mob, or is the Philadelphia mob so disorganized now that it doesn't matter anymore?
There you go.
We don't know the answer to that. I don't know that the government's going to go in that direction. I think the other thing, and this is something you've mentioned before, is pressure is building on these guys. Yeah. Is anybody in this case going to decide, I don't want to go to jail for 30 years?
Yeah.
And then it comes a question of, what can you do for us?
Yeah.
What do you know that we need to know?
Yeah. There's a potential life sentence here with these guys.
Yeah.
The years are huge.
Right, and these guys are targeted, principal targets. It would be hard, I think, for them to make a deal, given that they're the principal figures in it, unless they've got something that's going to take the feds in a whole.
Throw in the fact that Joe LaForte's wife is also charged here.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure points too. Those two cases, while seemingly different cases, may have connections that play out as this thing unwinds. We'll see.
Okay.
It's a fascinating story.
In the par funding SEC stuff and the criminal indictment, 63 count superseding indictment, Joe LaForte is represented by a New York lawyer. In a gun case, when they raided his house in connection with this investigation, they found 7 or 8 guns, including some high-powered weapons in the house. He's a convicted felon. He's charged with a gun case. That comes up for trial in January. I spoke to his attorney yesterday, Brian McMonigal. He's the local attorney. He's just handling the gun case. That is scheduled for trial in January. The big case is scheduled for April. It will not happen in April 2024. I'm told the discovery here is enormous in this case because it's a paper trail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are reams and reams of documents, and whenever you're going to do a big financial case like that. So the gun case is up first. It bears watching, see what happens with that, and it'll play out from there. But I don't lose sight of New York.
Oh yeah.
When you're talking about this.
All right, let's talk about a little one dot. You know the dot you want to connect. One dot in this 25-page pretrial detention motion is Joe LaForte approaching somebody older man, 75 years old, in a pizzeria, is there with his son and screams at him, "You ratted me out," or something to that effect, according to the allegations in here, and either slapped him, bumped him, did something. The guy left with his son. The guy's wife comes back, gets into a confrontation with Joe at the pizza place. His initials are SP. This document says that SP person was also a loan sharking witness in the 2020 indictments down here against Dominic Grandi, Stevie Mazzone, Salvatore Mazzone, Sonny Mazzone, those kind. In that case, SP is a loan sharking victim / witness. And apparently, LaForte thought he was going to be a witness in this case and ratted him out in this case. That's the only dot I see at this point. And it's a dot.
Right, and it's an overlap that could take this whole case in another direction. We don't know. But that is a link that I'm sure the feds are aware of, the connections and the players and all of that. So, like I said, in the beginning we looked at par funding as a big financial scam. There may be organized crime overtones, or there may be organized crime connections to the whole operation.
These guys who used to cushy stuff, they had like $20 million worth of properties, all kinds of things. They're in the federal detention center in Center City, Philadelphia now, awaiting trial, which could, I'm going to bet, take another year to do. They got a lot of time to think.
Not a pleasant place to be.
No, and think about their future here, with a threat of major league jail time in front of them.
Well, I mean, that's the pressure points, and we'll see what happens. You know, and what else do they have to give up? That's the fundamental question.
That's the key.
What else, if anything, can they give up to get out from under their own problems? Always the case in this kind of situation.
Right now on the record, they're fighting this. They're defending this. They got a big-time New York lawyer. Brian McMonagle's representing Joe in the gun case down here. They're going to put up a fight. It appears right now, but let's see what happens.
Absolutely.
All right, George, let's wrap this up. We did a piece a while back about Martin Tassetta from the Lucchese crime family trying to get out of jail. He's finally going to get his day in court.
Right, he's the last offender from that 1993 case, still in prison. He's raised some really interesting points.
Okay, coming up in early December, we'll keep you updated.